Hello and welcome back to Project Management. So this is the second video in the series, giving you a better understanding of how to manage your project from start to finish and what to expect along the way. You'll never look at another property the same way once you know this. So in these videos we're going to be looking at trades, just explaining exactly what they are and what they do. So the first one we're looking at is demo. So when you do the demo, this is the very first thing that you should do in a property. So this is when you remove everything that is not required in the finished property. Ripping out all the old kitchen units, skirtings, architraves, door frames. Remove all of the old wall and floor coverings. So that's your wall tiles and your carpets and your linos and everything. If you've got any furniture that's been left in there, you've got your house clearance of furniture, etc. Remove all items to allow the other works to continue to be unhindered. So the last thing you want to do is send your plumber in to start first fixing the kitchen when the kitchen units are in there, because he's going to smash out little bits of the units and he's going to leave it a right mess. So you just need to get everything out there, all your wall coverings, paper and tiles. There's your bathroom suite. Try to leave a toilet and some running water, so if you can, leave the toilet and a wash hand basin. If you can't, then so be it. But to try to leave some toilets for people to use. Any built-in DIY items, if they've got any fitted wardrobes or any cupboards that are in alcoves and things like that. So you just need to remove everything. So it's a blank canvas. So when the trays come along, it's nice and clean. Make sure it's all swept out, everything's moved. Don't just rip it all out and leave a big pile of it in the living room or somewhere, because it's people need to work there. So you're better just ripping everything out, get it in a skip or in the garden if you need to, but ideally get it in a skip, get it away, and then it's a nice clean property. And then when each tray comes along, they can make sure, or you can make sure, that they've left it all clean and tidy as well, and there's no arguing over who's made the mess or not. So you need to make sure you remove ceilings, then pipes and cables can be fitted from below. So when you're doing a rewire or a central heating, putting new pipes in, and you've got two options. One is you can take the floorboards up from above, which can be a bit of an issue if you're taking loads of floorboards up. People can fall through them, put the foot through them and injure them in some way. But if you're doing a new replacing a kitchen, obviously you've got lots of cables going into the kitchen, so the room directly above, if it's the bathroom, it might be nice and tidy. You might not be changing the bathroom, but you might have to destroy the bathroom floor. So if you can get away with not taking up the floorboards and you can remove the kitchen ceiling, that means all the first fixing, electrics and plumbing can all be done from below, working off some steps or a hop up, which is far safer. And then they can get all the cables in, and then you're going to plaster the kitchen anyway. So what's a bit of plasterboard? You'd be skimming the ceiling, so a bit of plasterboard. It's not going to take them too long, only half an hour for them to do it, and a bit of plaster. So it's not the end of the world, and you're going to get a far better job. You're not going to get any noisy floorboards afterwards, because no matter how well you fix them, but once they've been taken up, at some point they're going to start creaking. So if you can avoid that issue, and then it's a far better job, and you've got far less maintenance issues going forward. So remove all ceilings, and then pipes and cables can be fitted from below. This will reduce the risk of falling through the gaps and unsecured floorboards. Also, noisy floorboards in the future, as once removed it will not be fitted as securely as it was before. You may need to use a plumber to disconnect the kitchen and bathroom items. Don't leave items mentioned above to the plumber, electrician and joiner to remove them if they are in the way, unless it's in their package of works. Get them removed first. It's the correct way to carry out this job before other trades follow. You'll get a better job done by the following trades when there is nothing in their way. They will always give you a better job, as it shows you know what you're doing, which is managing the project. Make sure once everything is removed, the property is clean and clear, so the next trade has somewhere to put everything. Tools and materials which are out of the way and also work. You need to check once the demo is completed that the first fix trades can follow. This is a first key stage check. So just make sure that once you've got somebody to do the demo, you check that everything is demoed before the first fix trades follow on. And if not, get the person back to complete the demo. Structural alterations. So this will be any brickwork alterations, new doorways cut out, bricking up windows and doors, removing chimney breasts, building walls, fitting RSJs, extensions. So all of these need to be completed before the first fix begins. If you remember back to my the previous video with Furlong Road, when the wall wasn't taken out and moved back for the front door, and then the light switch was fitted in the wrong place. So you may need to remove electrical sockets, heating controls or radiators or fires from chimney breast before the chimney breast is removed, which we've mentioned previously. You need to know what needs to be done before a trade can follow and understand who to put in first. So first things that I would put in after the structural alterations is joinery. So this will be all carcass, anything that needs to be done so the following trades can do their job, which can include studded walls, door casings, joists, staircase, new posts, window boards and noggins, etc. Stud walls will need to be erected before the plumber and electrician do their first fix. Otherwise they're not going to have anything to fasten the wiring or the pipework to. Internal door frames only and not the doors must be fitted at this stage. Do not let the joiner fit the doors, the internal doors and frames. These need to be done, the doors, after plastering is done. He will say it is better to fit the casings after the plaster. This is not the case. It is easy to fit the door and frame at the same time. That is why the joiner wants to do them. The frames need to be fitted at the first fix stage before the plaster can work, so the plaster can work to the door frame. The finish will be 10 times better as there will be no patching. The frames will be in tighter as they are plastered all around, and the wall will be parallel to the frames, which will reduce cracking to the cork and to the architraves in future. You may need to get or to fit temporary handrails around the top of the stairs to stop anyone falling. Remember what we said before, that you are responsible for health and safety, for the safety of everyone. You may think the workers know the area, so it is unnecessary, but do not fall, pardon the pun, into this trap. You have a duty of care with a building site to, 1, make sure it is safe for their workers, and 2, if someone breaks in and falls down a gap, like just mentioned, then someone could be taken to court and sued. Don't let this be you. Internal door frames should be fitted at this stage and make sure they are the correct size. Especially with studded walls, there should be no excuses of having them too big. When it comes to existing brick walls, you can have a problem with an exact size of frame, as the brickwork walls or the brick walls can vary in size. If this is the case, make sure the frame is fitted with the rebate side set to the correct plaster line, and then you can fit a lat on the other side to pack out the plaster line. This way there will be no issues with doors binding on the frame or lat and all the problems that follow. Make sure window boards are fitted at this stage. Also, where there's a loft access, knocked out in the correct location. All studded walls need to be fixed to perimeter brickwork. Block studded walls, these need to also be packed solid. All internal door frames need to have the required fixings and to be packed solid, same as the walls. So external doors and windows. So the property needs to be secure and watertight. You will need to be fence accredited to fit windows and doors to be able to sign them off and register them. If you are not, then building control will need to be notified for them to sign them off. There is a cost for building control. These need to be in place so the joiner can fit the window boards, so make sure that windows are fitted so the window boards can be then fitted before it's plastered, not after it's plastered. Plasterers can board directly up to the frames, then you're not going to have the lumps of plaster cracking and falling out in the future, so make sure that the board tied up to the frames. This also avoids having plastic trim around the windows, which looks daft, especially on new plaster. On an old house, the window fitters are always going to fit plastic trim architrave around on the inside, which covers the gap in between the new window and covers any damage to any decoration. You can fit protection to these to avoid damage. There is plenty of these about, lots of companies who supply them. And there's a company that we've used regularly, which is Ockwells. They do lots of side protection. You can just get some sticky self-adhesive plastic that goes onto it. There's lots of things that you can do to protect all the new elements that get fitted. So once your first fixed join has been in, then the next one that you put in is your first fixed plumber. So always put the plumber in before the electrician. The boiler can normally only go in a limited number of locations due to flue and other regulations, and the electrician will not know exactly when and where this is going. So he will probably put sockets or cables in the way. Also radiator locations need to be determined, and make sure the electrician doesn't put a socket where the rad needs to go. So it's important that you work all these out before. The little sketch that I did in previously just lets everybody know where everything's going. The most common place for a radiator is under the window, but sometimes the radiator in it is unable to go there. Also, you've got pipe runs can be harder to install, so it's easier to put the pipes in before the cables, as it's easier to bend a cable and feed through areas than pipes. The electrician will tell you it's better, they go in first, but stand your ground, put the plumber in, then the electrician. So your plumbing first fix, so this is all the carcass pipework that goes into the walls or under the floorboards and in the loft. This includes the hot and cold water, central heating pipes, boiler pipes, your gas, your waste pipes and outside tap, etc. All the open ends of these pipework must be capped off. You either put some sticky tape over it or you cap them off with proper end caps. This is just to stop any problems at a later date, like spiders and debris going in. Last thing you want is an issue with your boiler. You can't get the required gas through because there's a spider in the pipe or there's a bit of debris just blocking up the pipe. So it just makes sure that all are capped off. Ideally, all old pipework will need to be removed, which is fine when you're carrying out a full refurbishment. But if you're just doing some repositioning work, like moving the kitchen sink, bath, WC, wash and basin or hot water pipes, then you need to be aware of Legionnaire's disease. So there'll be a section to follow on there after that. So once the plumber's been in, and then it is time for the electrical first fix. So the electrician will follow the plumber and wire all the sockets and switches, etc. You will need to mark all the socket locations on the wall, as you may have a better idea of the layout and where furniture is to be placed than where the electrician thinks. So mark in most locations with just 2 X's about 450mm above floor level with a marker pen. This will identify a double socket. Ideally mark these on a rough drawing so it is clear enough to understand, as some of your marks may be hard to find. The kitchen sockets will generally get spaced out over the worktops and single sockets for like good spaces, so that's generally there's only limited areas where you can put your sockets in your kitchens. It's all depicted by the wall units in your white good locations. So make sure all electrical cables are coiled up inside the back boxes, so this will keep them out of the plasterer's way, and the plaster should give you a better job. And cut the plasterboard tighter to the box and remove excess plaster from the boxes, because what you'll find that The electrician will put his cables in the back boxes, leave them sticking out a couple of foot, which is in the way of the plasterer. So the plasterer will come along and he'll think, right, he's not bothered, so I'm just gonna fill all his back boxes with plaster. So the Sparky comes along after that, when he does his second fixing, finds all his plasterings finds all the plasterings all done inside the back boxes, so he's got to chop all this lot out, and he then thinks, sod it, plaster is not bothered, so I'm going to make a mess of his wall. He'll chop out extra bits, so there's plaster patching to do, and it's just a vicious circle. But if the electrician cuts enough cable so he's got enough for his second fix, calls it up inside, it's out of the plasterer's way, plasterer will come along, make sure the plaster cleans out with the back box, which he should do, so there's no issues when the Sparky comes back to his second fix. He just pulls the cables out and he can do his second fix, and it makes life so much easier. So, scenario to avoid, let's go first fix properly, leaves the cables out of the back box. So the plasterer comes along, struggles with the cables in the way, cuts the plasterboard around the back box, too big, and fills the box with plaster. So the electrician comes along to do his second fix and may find some back boxes completely plastered over. So he's then going to start smashing holes in the wall to try and find them, the missing back boxes. So this could be at any stage, and may only realise when testing after painting the carpets are fitted that some boxes are filled with plaster, and the electrician does extra damage to the plastering to remove the plaster. This may then need patching and give you an area that is constantly cracking around the switch. If it is tiled area, you could find a weak point behind the tile, and then when the socket front is tightened, the tile could crack. Some cables are completely cut off, and the cables need to be rewired back to the next part of the leg. So if you start off and the cables are all coiled in the back boxes, it avoids all this aggro and you get a better job at the end of it. So if you've removed the plasterboard ceilings, which we mentioned previously, this will let the electrician work from the floor below, which will avoid having to take up floorboards, as this can be a hazard and risk of people falling will be avoided. Also, you are cutting out two future issues: one, nailed cables and nailed pipes, and two, future creaking floorboards. I should know I have nailed pipes in the past, but with refixing floorboards, it's pretty hard sometimes to avoid and trying to get nails in to avoid cables and also pipes. So a double pole isolator switch will need to be fitted, if not already fitted. So this is to allow the safe isolation of the electric while working on the consumer unit. This is done free of charge to your electric supplier normally within a few weeks' notice. So it's just basically just a switch just before from where your meter is. You've got your main tails, which normally goes in straight into your consumer unit, your fuse box, and this just goes somewhere along those mains tails, so you can switch off on that switch. It kills all the power to the consumer unit, so you can work safely on the consumer unit. Because the only other thing that they'll do, the electricians, is they'll cut the seal on the meter, which is against the law, and then they'll do all their work with the electric disconnected, and then they'll connect it all back up. And then if the electric company comes along and starts asking questions, why is the seal cut, they'll automatically think that somebody's been tampering with it and trying to get free electric, but it isn't the case. So just make sure that you get these double pole isolated switches. They're not that much, and just makes it so it's a lot safer while you're doing the work. So then we have the pre-plaster check. So it is the second most important stage so far. So you must check that all the work is completed by all of the trades that have worked so far. See the checklist. So all the items must be in the correct place, as it is costly to move and make good later. If things are missing at this stage, then patching up plaster at a later date will be an extra avoidable cost on this project. A patched up wall is never the same as a fully plastered wall, and eventually you will see the patching or filler as it start cracking. So make sure that if you go in with the kitchen drawing, make sure that where all the white goods are going, all the sockets need to be in place, everything's like we mentioned before, with the cables are all coiled up nice and neatly. Inside the back boxes, check that the radiator pipes are all in the right place. So it's a case of just walk around with the drawings that you've got and just have a quick look, ideally on your own, because sometimes if you walk around with somebody, you can have your train of thought can be sidetracked, and they might be trying to sidetrack you on purpose, which is a bit of distraction, which stops you from seeing issues. So just go around on your own, have a quick look, and it will be better. Just make sure that they're all done. If they're not, make sure they get the different trades back before the plaster. So once all the first fixing stuff is done and your check's completed, then we have the plastering. So once you are sure that all the first fit works are finished, then the plastering can start. Make sure the property is cleaned out before the plasterer gets in, as he has a lot of materials and tools. You will get a better job done with a clean house to start with. So plastering. So plastering gang should take about a week to plaster a normal 3-bedroom house. Fully plaster it. This can vary depending on the size of house, gang and material delivery. They normally start boarding downstairs, but depending on what you've done, if you've just got patching up on walls or you're down to bare brickwork, they can start boarding the ceilings downstairs, boarding up all the walls, and then they'll work their way upstairs. So once fully boarded, they'll start plastering upstairs, because that's where all the gear is, and then they'll work their way back out of the property. So that's what they normally do when they're plastering a full house. If you're just doing patching, it might be slightly different, but that's how they normally do it. So they're normally working their way back to where the water is, and that's where the kitchen is. So which means the last room to be plastered is the kitchen, as this is where the water supply is for mixing and is less likely to get plaster splashes if plastered last. So this can be a problem if you're wanting to send the kitchen fitter in next, as you need to let the walls dry out before the fitting units on, as you'll get mouldy growing in the back of the units if it's fitted straight directly onto damp plastered walls. You can help by opening windows in rooms that have been plastered if possible, and leave them overnight on the vents. It's important to let the walls dry out naturally without heat and dehumidifiers, as you would get less cracking. So previously, when I've been on new builds, the plasterer goes in, depending on what time of year it is, they'll have the windows shut. So I'll go around, they'll lock the door up, I'll go around at the end of the day and just make sure that all the windows are on the night vent. It just lets a little bit of air blow through all through the night, which it's unbelievable how much moisture there is on these walls. And you'll come back, if you've not done that, you'll come back the next day and water condensation will just be on everything. So if you can do that, if you're in a position where you can put all the windows on night vents just to let a little bit of air circulate, if you can go in there, once they've finished plastering and you're in the next day doing something before the kitchen fitter comes, just open all the windows fully, let the wind blow through, let it dry all the walls out, all the ceilings. It's unbelievable how much water is actually in that property once plastering is done, and you've got to get it all out before you can start doing the next stages like fitting units and putting your mist coat on. It is something to bear in mind in the different seasons. So in winter it is going to take a lot longer for it to dry out. If you've got 30-degree heat in the summer, it's going to take a lot less time to dry out. So just bear that in mind. The conditions outside, obviously, if it's throwing it down outside, humidity is high, and then it's going to take a lot longer for it all to dry out. So just bear this in mind when you're doing your program. So also ask if the kitchen can be plastered early to allow for drying out before the kitchen is fitted. So it might be able to save you a few days if the plastering can get done in the kitchen. That can be drying out while the plasterers are doing the rest of the house. It might take, depending on the size of the gang, it could take them maybe 2 or 3 weeks to get a house. If they're doing a full house, the chances are, if it's a small gang, they might have other work. There will be other people screaming at them wanting work done. So just make sure if they can fit the kitchen, at least it gets the kitchen fitter in while the rest of the house is drying out slightly. So you should have fitted the correct size door frames so they can be plastered up to flush, and this will give a better finish once the second fixed joinery is done with less use of cork and filler. It is good practice to fit insulation for soundproofing properties around bathrooms, WCs and en-suites. So if you've got studded walls, just make sure that once the plasterer, this should be in his package, generally what happens is the plasterer will board one side of the wall and then fit some insulation inside and then board over it so it holds it in place. Just helps with soundproofing when you go into the toilet and what have you, so people can't hear as much. Just something to bear in mind, but you just put them in his package or their package. So that is the end of this section. I hope you've enjoyed the training and have learned plenty about being a project manager. If you'd like to learn more, then look out for more training. Make sure you like, follow and share my content. Subscribe if you don't want to miss out on any future training. If you'd like to learn more about managing projects and the different training packages, then please message me on one of the following. So you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Instagram, and obviously you found me on YouTube. So that is goodbye from me, and I will see you in the next training. So I hope you've learned a little bit something and a little bit of knowledge, and use it if you can.